What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners, your Week 9 tight end start and sit report. We're going to go over all the tight ends for Week 9 right now. But before we do that, we have to jump into all of our accuracy from last week, being completely transparent. Let's take a look at how we did on the tight end side, back up over 70%, exactly where we want to be. Over 70% is our goal every single week. Some good hits last week, some misses. Darren Fells, oh man, really wish I wouldn't have missed on that one last week. But with that being said, our accuracy so far in rankings this season has been awesome. Take a look at that accuracy report right there over on Fantasy Pros. Right now, number 1 overall for tight ends, 7 overall for wide receivers, 32nd overall for quarterbacks, 24th overall for the season. Running backs, still a work in progress, but since this is a tight end video, you're in the right place. As Headliner Nation has been so lovingly referring to me lately as the tight end whisperer. We're going to whisper some more tight ends right now, and I'm going to give you all the information you need to know to make a decision for Week 9. Thursday night football, not a whole lot to see here unless you're a George Kittle owner. George Kittle going up against the Cardinals, who are the only team giving up more than 20 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So he's obviously a start for you this week. Now for Clay and Williams, these guys, nothing to see here. Yes, Clay has had one decent game so far this season, but their combined 4.5 fantasy points per game is not nearly enough to consider streaming. So go ahead and toss these guys on the waiver wire. Don't worry about streaming either of them, but George Kittle could likely be your tight end 1 this week. Only one tight end that I'm looking at in the Houston and Jacksonville game, and that is Darren Fells. Yes, he can be a little touchdown dependent. However, the Jacksonville Jaguars are giving up nearly as many touchdowns to wide receivers and tight ends. Tight ends have 4 scores this year against Jacksonville. Wide receivers have 5. So definitely a good possibility he finds the end zone this week. Want to rewind to last week just a little bit with Fells as well. When Will Fuller went down, we thought Kenny Stills was going to have a really good week last week. We thought that he might be that guy that just kind of moves in and takes those Will Fuller targets. However, Deshaun Watson has been looking towards his tight ends all season long. They just haven't gotten a lot of notoriety from the fantasy football community. Fells is up to tight end 6 now. I'm going to continue to play him. With Jordan Akins, though, I'm going to sit him on the bench. Yes, he can have a good game now and then, but Fells clearly seems to be the number 1 tight end target right now for the Houston Texans. We have 3 guys listed for Jacksonville as sits this week. I'm not interested in playing all of them because basically last week or last 2 weeks, they've split snaps. So it's really hard to tell who is going to be on the field at any given time. One reason that I'm putting these 3 guys on the sheet for you this week so you can see their names is if there's an injury for some way, shape, or form moving forward, and maybe one of these guys starts to play more towards 70% of the snaps or something like that, at least you can keep that in the back of your mind in case they have a really good matchup and we might need to stream one of them. But that's the main reason for putting all 3 of them there. They've basically all been splitting snaps. We'll see what happens moving forward, but no interest in any of them right now. Washington and Buffalo doesn't have anything interesting for me at the tight end position this week. As you can see, 3 sits listed there on the screen. Buffalo's only giving up the 3rd fewest points to tight ends right now. And Jeremy Sprinkle hasn't had more than 3 targets since week 3. His season high receiving yards in the game is only 24. So he's not getting nearly enough volume. And this is a really good passing defense, so I don't expect too much out of them this week. Tyler Kroft did take the majority of the snaps last week, but was it because of the large deficit? Maybe because of the deficit they got him out there and got him moving a little bit. We saw Knox not get nearly as many snaps last week as Kroft, or is that something that we're going to see moving forward? However it may be, we got to monitor that situation a little bit more, but for right now, we're not going to play either of them. For Minnesota and Kansas City, Travis Kelce, yes, he's going to be a weekly start for you this week. Minnesota's middle of the pack in terms of stopping tight ends, giving up around 12 fantasy points per game right now to opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce should end up seeing a decent amount of workload this week. Matt Moore could continue to look his way if the deep passing game is not something that they can get going. On the other side, Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr. I know we got a little bit excited a couple of weeks ago. I got a lot of questions about these guys because of the game that they put up a couple of weeks ago when Adam Thielen went out. But even if he's missing, last week they didn't get nearly enough looks. I don't expect them to get nearly enough looks this week either. So I would rather chance it with somebody else than try and start either of these guys. Another game and not a whole lot to see at the tight end position with the Jets and the Miami Dolphins. Now, for the Jets, Chris Herndon could end up being back this week. He's been questionable the last couple of weeks. Does he make it back? we'll wait and see on that. Ryan Griffin, he did find the end zone a couple of times last week, but prior to last week, he was the tight end 47 on the season, only averaging 1.8 fantasy points per game. So last week is not something that we can expect moving forward. For Chris Herndon, will he be on a limited snap count? The Dolphins are actually only giving up 11 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. So the one position they've done a decent job of stopping. I don't know if I'm going to rely on Chris Herndon this week. If he gets back, limited snap count, maybe they take a little bit easy with him. If the Jets get up by a decent amount, maybe they don't continue to run out Chris Herndon for worry of possibly re-injuring something again. So I definitely expect a lot of Le'Veon Bell this week. I don't expect a lot of Chris Herndon or Ryan Griffin. A couple of big plays from the receivers, but the running back is really where the Jets are going to eat this week. Le'Veon Bell is going to have a good week. We're going to sit Mike Gesicki as well. The Jets are giving up the fourth fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends right now, only 8 points per game. So he doesn't even have enough upside. He's had a couple of decent games recently, but not enough to go ahead and consider him as a start again this week. So a lot of questions on what you should do with Zach Ertz. Well, the answer is you're going to continue to play him because it's hard to sit Zach Ertz knowing that in the past he's been one of, if not the main target in this passing game. It hasn't worked out recently. As of right now, Zach Ertz over the last 3 weeks, the tight end 29. So he hasn't been very good over the last 3 weeks. However, I still would have you put him in the game because you don't know what you're going to get. Unless you have a much better streaming option, you can't really put Ertz on the bench. Now with Dallas Goedert, we are going to start him this week. Recently, we had him listed as a sit. He's been playing far too well, though. He has a touchdown in his last 2 games, 12 receptions over the course of his last 3 games, and over the last 3 weeks, he's been the tight end 6. So Dallas Goedert, we are going to put out there. We are going to play him. If he's still available on your waiver wire for some reason, grab him up, put him on your team. Now for Trey Burton, as you know, not a big fan of him. Hasn't really done anything. Mitchell Trubisky, talked about him on the quarterback show. Don't like him this week either. Burton, we're not going to worry about. It pains me to say it, but for the first time this season, Vance McDonald is going to be a sit for me. I continue to wait on that breakout, and it just hasn't happened yet. Yes, it could be because of injuries. Yes, it could be because he's played with 3 different quarterbacks this season. But the one thing that you have to key on with Vance McDonald that's been an issue is creating yards after the catch. Last season, at the end of the year, he was 3rd overall out of every single player, okay? Not just tight ends, of all players. He was 3rd in yards after the catch per reception with 7.9 yards after the catch per reception. His yards per reception this year is only at 8.6 right now. So he basically has as many yards right now per reception as he did after the catch last year. He just hasn't been able to create any yards after the catch. Is that because Antonio Brown's been missing? Is it because the offense has been sputtering? Is it because of we don't know. We don't know for sure. I want to continue to monitor the situation because hopefully at some point this season he will get going. But as of right now, you're going to have to sit him. For Jack Doyle, he just hasn't produced on a consistent basis. We're going to go ahead and put him on the bench as well. Yes, he could have a decent game here or there, but just not nearly enough upside in a game that I think Pittsburgh is really going to try to take control of the Colts. I like the defense for Pittsburgh this weekend. Now with Eric Ebron, I will go ahead and start Ebron this week because he has good touchdown upside. Pittsburgh is allowing 10 red zone targets to opposing tight ends this season. That's 5th most in the league. So because Eric Ebron is touchdown dependent, we're hoping for that touchdown when he goes into our lineup. I expect him to be targeted again this week if they can get into the red zone and he can get himself a score. Loved Jonnu Smith last week. However, this week I'm not going to put him out there. We still haven't heard about Delaney Walker yet either. There's no confirmation on whether or not he is not going to play this week. So regardless of who plays, we're not starting either of them. Carolina's only giving up 9.83 fantasy points per game to opposing tight end, 9th fewest in the league, playing at Carolina. Tough game for them. Not interested in starting either one this week. Now, with Greg Olsen, he hasn't played well with Kyle Allen at quarterback. He was the tight end 4 from weeks 1 through 3, but since then, he's been the tight end 43 with 2.8 fantasy points per game. Tennessee does allow over 12 points to opposing tight ends, and they typically limit wide receivers. So I think there is a really good chance we could see Greg Olsen get just enough done to get up towards the top 12 tight ends this week. Not a whole lot of upside, but again, just enough. I think he will get you those points, and we can list him as a start this week. I said it on the quarterback show. If you have anybody from Detroit or Oakland, we're starting him this week, and that also pertains to the tight ends. Darren Waller, he is top 5 in almost every single major statistical category for tight ends this year. So you're going to continue to play him, even though Detroit's done a decent job at times of limiting wide receivers this year. For TJ Hawkinson, we're going to list him as a start this week as well. Oakland is giving up 16.26 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, third most in the league. This is going to be a really offensive heavy game. Expect both of these guys to be in the middle of that and get you some fantasy points. All right, there's a whole lot of notes on this game, as you can see down below. I had to put a what if scenario on this one. With Hollister and Wilson, we're not starting either of them since Will Dissly went down with his injury. The Seahawks have not looked towards their tight end. With Howard and Brait, though, it really depends on what happens with these two. Right now, it looks like Howard is iffy to play at best. So if he is out, we're starting Cameron Brait. The Seattle Seahawks are giving up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends so far this season. So I will start whoever plays. If Howard, for some reason, is going to play and it doesn't look like he's limited, I would toss him out. But more than likely, no matter what, I will put Brait in this week. I think it's highly likely that he finds the end zone. They're giving up more than enough fantasy points to tight ends that Brait or Howard could have a great week this week. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that Howard sits, because if he does, that makes that decision a lot easier. Not a whole lot of what should we do here, but more than likely, for me, it's going to be Brait no matter what. Another game, nothing to see here. Not a whole lot at the tight end position this week. With these guys, though, all sits here. Fant, Seals-Jones, Brown. Seals-Jones and Brown are basically splitting snaps down the middle. Neither of them have really done anything at this point. And Noah Fant, he just hasn't had that breakout yet. Again, rookie tight ends typically take a lot longer to develop than other positions. So monitor him in dynasty leagues, but for redraft leagues, we're not going to start him anytime soon. Jimmy Graham continues to be a roller coaster this season, and he either has a really bad game or he has a good game. And against the Los Angeles Chargers, I'm not going to take a chance with him this week. The Chargers are only allowing 10 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. He's been really boom or bust. He's teetering on the edge of that tight end 12 position right now, so he's just barely a tight end 1. Coming up quickly, though, a lot of guys behind him that could be adding some fantasy points, so he could drop out of that status here really quick. Now with Hunter Henry, he's definitely in our lineup this week. He's probably my tight end 2 behind George Kittle. Really like him against the Green Bay Packers, who are allowing the 7th most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Now with Hunter Henry, obviously he's missed some time, but in his numbers when he's been on the field for the Los Angeles Chargers have been good. He's averaging 7 targets per game, 5 receptions per game, and 76 yards per game. So the volume is 100% there for Hunter Henry. Continue to put him out, and if he adds a touchdown for you, that's just a little bit extra. 2 more teams that have done a good job of taking the tight end out of the game plan for opposing teams this year. For the Baltimore Ravens, we're going to start Mark Andrews this week, although I am looking at some limited upside for him. New England is allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to tight ends right now, only 5.69. However, the volume has been there for Andrews all season long. He has had no fewer than 7 targets in a game this year. Now for Ben Watson, I know a lot of people have wanted to pick him up, stash him, put him in the game. I'm not going to be playing him right now. Yes, it's going to take some time to get going. Yes, it could be a couple of more weeks before he does get going, so we will monitor it. However, they have done nothing with the tight end position yet this year. Will it change just because it's been Watson? I don't really think so. Maybe some decent streaming weeks. This is not one of them, though. We're going to leave him on the bench this week. For Dallas and New York, these teams have already played one time this season. Evan Ingram ate up Dallas when they played. The last time that they played, 14 targets, 11 receptions, 114 yards, and a touchdown. The Cowboys are allowing just over 14 fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends, the 5th most in the league. So he is an obvious start for us this week. With Jason Witten, though, I'm going to go ahead and get him in the lineup this week. Giants are allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. But they haven't really faced any good tight ends yet this year either. It's been a hodgepodge. And in week 1, Jason Witten had a pretty good game. He did have a touchdown against them in week 1. He is a touchdown-dependent play in this game again. He's had at least 4 targets in every game this season, except for one in which he had 7 targets. And he has the 8th most receptions of any tight end this season. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in the lineup. I think he can possibly find the end zone again this week. He played well against them in week 1. They have limited tight ends since then, but there haven't been a whole lot of tight ends since then that have warranted a start either. So we'll see what happens, but I'm going to start both of these guys this week. Witten is a good streaming option for you. There we have it, Headliner Nation. All set, tight ends for the week. Don't forget, though, we drop all of our rankings videos after Thursday Night Football. So we'll take those players out of the equation, and we'll talk more about the Sunday games and the Monday game and what you could be looking forward to from those teams. So keep an eye out for all of our rankings videos. Don't forget, though, hit the like button below. Make sure you comment with any questions. More importantly, subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell notification as well. So whenever we go live or whenever we drop new content, you are going to know. Headliner Nation, good luck in week 9. We'll see you on the ranking show and the live show on Saturday night. Have a good one. Until then, thanks.